Resurrected from the dead, I no longer want to be Zhou HuaiYan's wife. A rescue from drowning made me wholeheartedly devoted to him, and I swore I would marry no one else but him. I gave everything I had to support him, making him the brightest star in the great Z Dynasty. But he only wished to shine for my cousin who entered the palace as a concubine, offering her strategies and exhausting every effort for her. When I was pushed into the water and drowned by my cousin, he was just behind a wall, thinking of finding a beautiful flower for her. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The madam is awake. How about wearing this dress for tomorrow's spring blossom feast? I stared blankly at Pan-chun holding the dress, and when I realized something, tears started pouring down like rain. Pan-chun hurriedly put down the dress to comfort me. What's wrong, madam? Were you having a nightmare? Don't cry, all dreams are false. False. I told myself by pinching my palm that it was just a nightmare. I have yet to become the laughing stock of the entire capital. This dress is too plain, bring me a brighter one. But doesn't the madam like the elegant style of your cousin? All the dresses made this season are in lighter shades. Then look for the earlier ones, aren't many still unworn? The plain ones do not suit me. I lifted the quilt and got out of bed. Outside, the spring flowers were in full bloom. I remember that when I died, it was also in such a splendid and exuberant season. While boating on the lake, I was rescued by Zhou HuaiYan and brought to the painting barge. My summer dress was drenched, making me not dare to rise from his chest. Under the watchful eyes of many onlookers, Zhou HuaiYan had no choice but to carry me into the boat cabin. Knowing that I was betrothed to him, I covered myself in the brocade quilt and giggled foolishly. But who would have expected, that was the beginning of my misfortune in the latter half of my life. Zhou HuaiYan thought that I purposely fell into the water to marry him, causing him to lose the opportunity to marry his beloved. On the wedding night, I kept the bridal chamber by myself, becoming the joke of the entire capital. It was my cousin who persuaded him. No matter how flatteringly I tried, it couldn't match a light word from her. From then on, towards me, whether good or bad, warm or cold, it all seemed to be controlled by a thread, with the other end held by my cousin. Zhou HuaiYan said, this was what we owed my cousin. If he could marry my cousin as he wished, she wouldn't have been selected to enter the palace, where she would live a life of constant vigilance. So how could he not help her? Therefore, my embroidery became my cousin's way of flattering the Empress Dowager. Only when he asked me to embroider would Zhou HuaiYan smile gently at me. He said, Ruyan, you'll help me, won't you? I've already agreed. I wouldn't want to disappoint Fiance. She has no one else to rely on but us, right? For that bit of gentleness, I ruined my eyes. But my cousin became the praised ingenious lady of the palace, winning the Empress Dowager's favor. Zhou HuaiYan was overjoyed but completely forgot that those scriptures were embroidered by me during the lantern-lit nights. As a result, I was so exhausted that I couldn't even keep the child in my belly. While enduring the pain of my belly tearing apart, Zhou HuaiYan was preparing a birthday gift for my cousin. A gift, which was a statue of the goddess of childbearing blessed by a high monk. Just because my cousin expressed to him her worries about not being able to bear the emperor's child soon enough to keep his favor. It was like a terrible dream. In the dream, my eyes couldn't see clearly, my neck ached year after year. I gave everything for the person I admired in my youth until my light was extinguished. In the end, in Zhou HuaiYan's heart, I was still just an obstacle to marrying my cousin. Fortunately, I was reborn. Reborn before my marriage, everything is still in time. At the spring blossom feast, I wore a bright water-red dress adorned with ruby ornaments sent by my brother from J City. Upon seeing me, my cousin's frown was almost imperceptible, she softly said. There are many esteemed guests at today's feast. It would be better to be gentle and low-key. I looked at her modest attire, as delicate as a willow in the breeze, and curved my lips. My brother says I look good in red. Something seemed to flash in my cousin's eyes, but I didn't see clearly and didn't care. At the feast, I met a friend who leaned on my shoulder laughing and talking. Today you are appropriately dressed, what about before? You almost squandered your stunning beauty. I just smiled, and then heard her say, but you made your cousin look dull. I looked over. Today my cousin had been keeping her distance from me. Back when I imitated her, she used to always hold my arm and be inseparable from me. The elegant dressing style was also taught to me by her. My dearest family member is only my brother. He safeguarded J City, achieved outstanding military merits, and fought lifelessly on the battlefield, all just so his sister could live a good life. Sadly, his sister was foolish. It wasn't until after my brother's death that I woke up, realizing that my past forbearance was completely useless. My cousin suddenly came to me, intimately holding my hand. "Sister, earlier a noble praised the handkerchief you gave me." I didn't see clearly and said it was my embroidery. Her eyes showed no apology, only a gentle smile. "It was unintentional, you won't blame me, will you?" In the past, I didn't care, a handkerchief was nothing at all. Afterwards, I even sent her more. Who would have known that it would become her opportunity to enter the palace? I held her hand back and softly smiled. Said neither good nor bad. My cousin then smiled, thinking the matter was settled. However, I never expected that when I turned around to look for her. I pretended it was unintentional, and revealed her true intentions. After returning to the house, my cousin cried her heart out. My aunt's words were full of thorns, and my uncle exuded authority without anger, scolding me for my inappropriate behavior. They even wanted me to kneel in the ancestral hall. I did not go. This is my brother's residence. They claimed to be elders to take care of me, eating and drinking from my brother's holdings, yet still seeking to torment his sister. What kind of logic is this? With chaos in the household, I closed my courtyard door and painted a picture of plum blossoms. Then slowly began to fill the petals with vermilion ink. In another month, once these 6 plum blossoms were filled, all this drama would come to an end. They summoned Zhou HuaiYan to the house. Before I fell into the water, I was deeply in love with Zhou HuaiYan. After our betrothal, my love deepened further, revering his every word as though it were a decree. How could you do such a thing? What is Fiance to do in the future? Seeing my cousin's red, swollen eyes, Zhou HuaiYan felt an indescribable pain. He looked at me with eyes full of disdain. "It's just a handkerchief, do you have to fight with Fiance over it?" Looking at his face, which had once entranced me, I found it laughable. Why fight? That handkerchief is mine to begin with. With tears in her eyes, my cousin looked at me piteously. "Sister, did I offend you somehow? What has made you unhappy?" As she spoke, she glanced at Zhou HuaiYan. That glance held 1,000 unsaid words, tender as water, filled with boundless affection. "But you have already gotten what she wanted." Her tone was filled with such desperate sorrow that Zhou HuaiYan's heart twisted in pain, making him want to approach her. However, she took a step back, her gaze fixed only on me. "Is this still not enough?" I looked at her, then at Zhou HuaiYan. How touching and tragic their love appeared, yet I was the one who ruined it. If that's the case, I'm willing to break off my engagement with Lord Zhou and let sister have him. I watched my cousin's expression. Sure enough, there was a hint of panic. Zhou HuaiYan looked at me in surprise, his eyes full of disbelief, thinking I was just speaking out of anger. Yes, I had been infatuated with him for so long. And now that we were finally betrothed, how could I give up so easily? Before I could say more, my uncle, who had been sitting silently, spoke up. "Stop this nonsense, a marriage isn't child's play." That meant he disagreed. I had expected this. In our past life, my cousin, after becoming empress, had laughed softly by the lotus pond while telling me everything. From the very beginning, they never intended for my cousin to marry Zhou HuaiYan. The most regretful thing is to desire but not obtain, which is why they spared no effort to make up for it. This matter ends here. Ruyan, reflect on your actions, and no more such angry words in the future. My uncle gestured for Zhou HuaiYan to comfort me, but he did not notice. His whole attention was on my cousin, his eyes pensive. I returned to my courtyard and continued filling the petals. There were still more than half a month left. Zhou HuaiYan suddenly turned over a new leaf and came to find me, bringing snacks like cherry preserves and plum cakes. I curled the corner of my mouth. These were my elder sister's favorites. "Ruyan, I have had someone calculate an auspicious day for our wedding. How about setting it 10 days from now?" Though phrased as a question, Zhou HuaiYan's tone was affirmative. He was certain I wouldn't object, even that I would be delighted, possibly even impatient to marry him. In our past life, it was the same, only it wasn't him who proposed. My aunt had given me two options, one was 10 days later, the other was to wait half a year. I didn't hesitate for fear that delays would bring changes. He added, although this is somewhat rushed, some formalities might be lacking. But it doesn't matter, we can make up for them later. I asked, the other day, my maid saw you buy a jeweled hairpin at the gold shop? He hesitated for a moment, then quickly regained composure. That was a birthday gift I had promised Fiance. I couldn't break my word. It's always like this, not even bothering to hide it. In Zhou HuaiYan's eyes, marrying me was already his biggest concession, how could I dare ask for more? Naturally, I didn't care about a hairpin, touching the bejeweled hairpin with jade drops in my hair. It's too rushed, a woman only gets married once in her life, it should be as complete as possible. Perhaps not expecting my refusal, Zhou HuaiYan was taken aback. I pretended not to notice, if my brother knew about such a crude wedding arrangement, he would be upset. Mentioning my brother, Zhou HuaiYan's lips moved, but he said nothing. It wasn't that he was in a hurry, rather he wanted the engagement called off. So did I. But just canceling it would be too dull. I looked at the plum blossom painting on the wall behind him, only 3 petals remained unfilled. I wanted to postpone the wedding, and my uncle and aunt took turns persuading me. They urged me to take what I could get. Not to lose a great opportunity over trivial matters and miss out on such a good man. Even exerting their elder authority, they tried to decide the date for me. Only if Zhou HuaiYan married me would my brother's support turn to him. And only with his deep affection for my cousin would he help elevate her. I just claimed to wait for my brother's return. Not mentioning breaking the engagement, as if only wanting his blessing. Originally intending to lift the roof, I settled for opening the window, which was easier. Seeing my unwavering attitude, I decided it didn't matter if things were delayed. My cousin came to reassure me that nothing had ever happened between her and Zhou HuaiYan. I'm so happy for you, sister, that you can marry such an outstanding man. Looking at the dazzling hairpin in her hair, I felt a wave of nausea. Only filling in the petals could make me happy, and there were still 2 flowers left. My cousin often came to my courtyard, and when she saw something she liked, she held onto it lovingly. Nearly half of the various intriguing items my brother sent me ended up with her. I used to think that our sisterly bond was deep, and it didn't matter to give her material things if she liked them. Yesterday, Pan Chen did an inventory of the storeroom and found many things missing. I then remembered that I had lent them to you. Could you return them now? My cousin's smile faded. Why bring this up all of a sudden? Since I'm getting married, I need to get things in order. I even made a list to make sure you don't forget anything. I asked Pan Chen to bring the list, which was very long. My cousin's face turned completely cold, and her tone was stiff. What do you mean by this? I just want my things back. Why are you upset? Could it be that you don't want to return them? I acted surprised and responded more dramatically than her. Is cousin trying to take my things? You're talking nonsense. She snatched the list and left in a huff. That very day, she returned a small portion. Kindly, I had someone tell her to take her time finding the rest. If she couldn't find them, we'd wait until my brother returned to borrow a couple of men to help her search. As expected, my cousin spoke to Zhou HuaiYan about it, and he came to see me. I've already explained that Fiance and I are innocent. Why do you keep making things difficult for her? Can't you be more virtuous and kind? Zhou HuaiYan's face was filled with anger, his beloved had been wronged, and her tears had fallen on his heart. I pulled out the same list again. She's returned some of the items, so you can handle the rest. He roughly grabbed the list, read it, and then angrily said, She treats you like a real sister, yet you fuss over such trivial things. It's absurd. He threw the list on the ground, frowning. The dowry for you is almost prepared. I'll personally add a few more items. Will that be enough? Since he's personally adding them, I should be overjoyed and willingly cancel the rest. In my previous life, until the day I died, he barely gave me anything. The few items he did give were to make me embroider for him. What a grand favor! Seeing my silence, Zhou HuaiYan assumed the matter was settled. He suddenly began looking around my room, and his eyes landed on a piece of embroidery on the display cabinet. He went over and took it, his voice softening. Could you give this to me? It was an embroidery of a fish biting a lotus petal that I had painstakingly made. I used gold and silver threads, and the scales of the fish shimmered while the water's surface gleamed. It was my masterpiece. You did say you'd give me something heartfelt. This will do. Zhou HuaiYan held onto the embroidery as I expected. He never cared about my things unless my cousin asked him to get them. Of course, I had deliberately placed it there. In my previous life, this embroidery ended up in my cousin's hands after I married Zhou HuaiYan. She presented it to a favored consort in the palace and gained favor, turning my half a year of work into a gift for others. Do you like it, Zhou HuaiYan? Will you cherish it? Zhou HuaiYan carelessly tucked it away and answered casually. I like it. I will. With his heart's desire fulfilled, he left in a hurry. I silently curled my mouth into a smile behind him. Liars will pay for their lies. The atmosphere in the house became subtle. My cousin resumed her smiling demeanor when she saw me. She held my hand, rubbing it gently, praising my skill. I've never seen such a skilled hand as yours, sister. Truly a blessing. I withdrew my hand, but her eyes still lingered, filled with an undisguisable intensity. I knew it was because her path to entering the palace had become clear. The connection, previously interrupted by the handkerchief incident, was restored by my embroidery. It now seemed more certain and solid. How wonderful! Looking around the mansion already being decorated, my aunt was busy like a spinning top. Under the pretense of preparing for my marriage, she was secretly giving all the benefits to my cousin. She was going to enter the palace as an imperial concubine, so naturally, she needed ample preparation. As for my marriage, it was already set in stone. As long as it looked presentable, who cared if there was anything underneath? In my previous life, my dowry was completely replaced. But getting to marry my beloved made me feel guilty, so I kept quiet and swallowed my misery. Despite the joyful atmosphere around the entire mansion, my courtyard remained quiet. Panchun asked, should we take out the wedding dress you embroidered to air and send it? No need. It won't be used anyway. The red ink fell on the paper, and I slowly curved my eyes into a smile. Only one flower left. Only 5 days left. How wonderful. No one knew when my brother would return. But I knew. He would appear 5 days later in the royal apricot garden at Prince Dun's birthday banquet. In my past life, when I met my brother, I had already become Zhou's wife. I was afraid my brother wouldn't agree, so I hastily married Zhou HuaiYan, thinking that even if my brother was angry, the deed would be done. But he wasn't angry, he was just heartbroken that my marriage was so hastily and simply done. Frustrated that he couldn't throw me a grand wedding. He didn't think much of Zhou HuaiYan, but he helped him for my sake. I was afraid my brother would dislike him even more, so I never dared to tell him about what happened with my cousin. But Zhou HuaiYan, who had finally reached a high position, indirectly caused my brother's death, leading him to die on the battlefield. Panchun woke me up. Madam, did you have a nightmare again? Drink some water. I was drenched in cold sweat, hurriedly pushed Panchun aside and ran barefoot to the wall, calming down only when I saw the plum blossom painting. 2 petals left, it's almost over. They will all pay the price. Every single one of them. Prince Dun's birthday, the royal apricot garden was filled with nobility. I changed my previous preferences and wore an outfit of watery green, picking the most simple and elegant jewelry to wear. A friend saw me and joked, if you hid in the trees, I wouldn't be able to find you. The way I dressed allowed my cousin to become affectionate with me again. Noticing my low spirits, she was very concerned. Sister, what's wrong? I blurted out, I am thinking of breaking off the engagement with Lord Zhou. My cousin seemed panicked and pulled me into an isolated path in the woods. How can you say such a thing at this time? I mimicked her gentle demeanor, tears welling up in my eyes. I still want to give him to you, cousin. These days, I had been very well behaved, not even mentioning the return of possessions, seemingly becoming that easily manipulated little fool from before. Lord Zhou wishes to marry me because he saved me from drowning. Out of obligation he became engaged to me, but I know, in his heart, he likes you, cousin. I have seen it clearly these days. Cousin also has feelings for Lord Zhou. I should not remain indifferent. My cousin anxiously said, haven't I told you, I have no feelings for Lord Zhou. I am very happy that you can marry him. Cousin is comforting me, right? I know. I wiped my tears, repeating the same meaning over and over again. Lord Zhou often says cousin is gentle and kind, you must not want to hurt me, which is why you are reluctantly saying this. How can I not consider your feelings when cousin treats me like this? I didn't even need to think to say these words. I had heard them too many times in my past life, they were almost engraved in my mind. I have just realized, compared to Lord Zhou, I value my friendship with cousin more. I will go and tell him now, I will not marry him, I will give him to you. Seeing a glimpse of a figure behind the trees, I became even more emotional, pretending to go and find someone. My cousin grabbed me, her tone somewhat impatient. I don't like Zhou HuaiYan. Only you would treasure someone like that, who would want your leftovers? Even if you don't marry him, I would never want him, I don't think much of him at all. So don't bring this up again, and stop talking about giving him up. I don't care, you just wait to get married. I was stunned. My cousin thought I didn't believe her, and wanted to make it clearer. But she noticed my gaze had moved past her and was looking at someone behind her. She hurriedly turned around, her face turning white. Lord Zhou, why are you here? It's not what you think, there's a reason. Why would Zhou HuaiYan appear? Of course, I had Pan Chun lure him over. Seeing his devastated and unbelieving expression, I only felt a sense of thrill. My cousin was truly panicked. If she lost Zhou HuaiYan's affection, all her previous efforts would be in vain. She chased after Zhou HuaiYan to try to salvage the situation. I, however, hurried off in another direction. In the distance, I spotted someone. Tall and sturdy, with steady steps, still wearing his armor that he hadn't yet had time to change out of. Brother! I lifted my skirt and ran over. My brother anxiously caught me, afraid the armor would hurt me. Behind him were many richly dressed individuals. They were all nobles trying to win him over. But my brother only wanted to see me as soon as possible, just like in the past life. I held back my tears, smiling as I said I wanted to introduce someone to him. Maybe he had already heard the rumors. My brother let me lead him, and the nobles behind him happily followed. The apricot garden was vast, but I knew where to find the person. It was my cousin who told me herself. We walked through the woods, the faint voices of conversation reached us. My heart belongs only to Fiance, even if the heavens and earth change, it won't alter. Oh, have they made up already? My cousin's trust in me was not in vain. Her soft voice continued, Fiance feels the same, no matter what the future holds. Lord Zhou will always have a place in Fiance's heart. The delicate figure slowly leaned into Zhou HuaiYan's arms. This scene, I had seen it in my past life, it was nothing new. But I trembled like a leaf in the wind, tears in my eyes, loudly exposing this loving couple's true identities. Lord Zhou, cousin. How can you treat me like this? The crowd was in an uproar as the two figures quickly separated. But it was too late. My elder brother's face was cold and stern, making Zhou HuaiYan nearly kneel. My cousin's face also turned ashen, and she fainted. Her eyes rolling back as she looked at the richly dressed onlookers. But she fainted too early. Zhou HuaiYan's affair with my cousin quickly spread throughout Apricot Garden. My aunt held my revived cousin in her arms, continuously repeating that it was all a misunderstanding. My cousin shed silent tears, still looking as pitiful as ever. But this time, it was futile. My elder brother kicked Zhou HuaiYan so hard he couldn't breathe for a long while, not even sparing a glance at my cousin's family. Those who witnessed the scene understood his feelings clearly and did not think they needed to show him any regard. Soon, everyone knew about it. Such a person, how can he be engaged to Ruyan? But my elder brother still cared about me, asking for my opinion. If I had still been adamant, he would have found another way. With reddened eyes, I shook my head, saying that as things stood, we should just let my cousin and Zhou HuaiYan be together. Others thought I was heartbroken, but I knew that my tears were solely because of my elder brother's unconditional support. My cousin, however, was unwilling to give up. Following her gaze, I saw a noblewoman holding a round fan not far away. As the noblewoman gently waved it, the fish on the fan seemed to come to life, shimmering under the sunlight. With reddened eyes, I walked over, straightened my back, and timidly yet firmly asked her about the fan. I explained that I had embroidered it day and night for my elder brother, even taking it to a high monk to bless it for his safety. But then it suddenly went missing. The noblewoman was astonished, looking at my cousin as if she were something filthy. But words alone were not enough. She asked how I could prove that it was my embroidery. I took the round fan and found a subtle roux character nearly blending into the design. How could I dare to deceive your grace with such a matter? If this item were not extremely important to me, I would not have dared to disturb you. To the noblewoman, however, it was still an offense. But my actions had a reason. And with my elder brother's protection, the noblewoman could only take out her anger in one way. Your cousin stole it and deceived me, saying she had embroidered it. Out of gratitude for your brother's military achievements, I will merely punish her this time. Punishment that doesn't take a life can sometimes be more terrifying than death. My cousin was publicly flogged 10 times. The palace matron's blows were so severe that my cousin's appearance was ruined, and she lost several teeth. She couldn't even beg for mercy or explain herself, forever tarnished by the reputation of a thief. The capable Panchun hurriedly came, pushing someone before her. My lady, this person was acting suspiciously. I had her seized and questioned. It turns out she was the one who pushed you into the lake that day. The young maid hurriedly knelt, her forehead quickly bloodied from kowtowing. Please forgive me, my lady. It was the old master's order. Xian made everyone leave so I could push you into the water. It was their plan, please understand. Zhou HuaiYan, holding my unconscious cousin, looked up in a daze upon hearing this. I crouched down, asking the young maid to explain in detail. So, it was all their plan to push me into the water to force Zhou HuaiYan to marry me. My brother, with a grim expression, single-handedly dragged my cousin and Zhou HuaiYan to the lake and apricot garden and threw them in. Then he turned to me, covering my eyes and taking my hand. Ruyan, let's go home. After our parents passed away, my uncle's family moved in, under the pretense of taking care of me. Worried about my loneliness and lack of care, my elder brother repeatedly reminded them to take good care of me, sending numerous supplies from J City each year to ensure they treated me well. Now, upon returning home, he drove them out of the house. Not a single item that didn't belong to them could be taken. And all the businesses they managed over the years were reclaimed. My uncle and aunt cried and pleaded, saying they had worked hard even if there were no great achievements. They said my brother was heartless and unfilial, threatening to report him. But their deeds quickly became known throughout the capital. And without my brother needing to say much, they dared not entangle further. I found the person who pushed me as a witness to ensure they couldn't use elders as an excuse anymore. I wanted to ruin their reputation so they could never rise again. My brother asked me, the emperor has promised me a reward on my return to the capital. Do you have any wishes, Ruyan? I want to accompany you to guard J City. I expressed my long-held wish. I'm not afraid of hardships, and with you around, I wouldn't suffer. I'm only afraid of being alone in the capital. I showed him my recent writings and drawings. I said I wanted to open an embroidery workshop in J City. As I heard there were unique embroidery techniques I wanted to learn and use to make clothes for him. My brother happily agreed, and soon we set the departure date. Before we left, Zhou HuaiYan came several times, wanting to see me. He even sent people to relay ambiguous words, things only my closest confidants knew. But I did not see him. Whether in this life or the next, I no longer wanted any involvement with him. But I did go to visit my cousin. They covet things that don't belong to them, and as a result, they've sold off almost everything they originally owned, leaving them to live in a rundown house. Seeing me, my cousin glares at me with anger, but the expression pulls at her cheeks, revealing an awkward look. I stand by her bedside, looking down at her. What a pity! If you could enter the palace, you might quickly rise to power and gain favor. With someone's help, you could even become an imperial concubine. Once you give birth to a prince and he inherits the throne, cousin, you would be. I watch as her eyes become distant, as if she's already dressed in a phoenix coronet and bridal robes. Becoming the most esteemed woman in the world. But now you can only marry Zhou HuaiYan. Besides him, there's no one in the capital willing to marry you. My cousin screams in fury, and I look at her exposed blackened gums, smiling gently. Shouldn't you be happy, cousin? I'm here specifically to congratulate you on your everlasting entanglement with Zhou HuaiYan. My cousin's family has become the laughingstock of the capital. Her dream of elevating herself through the palace shattered, so she's left with marrying Zhou HuaiYan. But without a generous dowry, without the help of my brother, there will be no chance for her to emerge. It wasn't that I hadn't thought of taking their lives. Upon my rebirth, I wished desperately to tear their flesh and drink their blood. But death is only a brief terror, a long existence worse than death is the punishment they deserve. Leaving the capital that day, I set fire to that painting of plum blossoms. In the flames, it seemed like I saw my past self, finally willing to close my eyes. Ruyan, it's time to leave. I'm coming. I wiped away the ashes and ran into the sunlight with my spiderwork-colored skirt. Brother, when we reach J City, I still want to raise little rabbits. Raise them, Ruyan, you can raise whatever you want. Brother will catch them for you. Zhou HuaiYan's side story. Climbing out of the icy lake water in the apricot orchard, I remembered everything. Fiance was trembling in my arms, a circle of people stood by the lake, but none reached out to help us. From a distance, I saw Ruyan's departing figure. It felt like the first time I had ever seen her back turned to me. After the apricot orchard incident, my marriage with Ruyan was called off without any delay. How could this happen? I couldn't understand. Even though I knew she liked Fiance, with her deep affection for me, she would only be heartbroken. How could she bear to break off the engagement with me? This must be the idea of her brother. They even drove Fiance's family out. How heartless and cold-blooded. I sought out Ruyan many times, wanting her to understand that this was wrong. In my past life, Ruyan was obedient to me, but this time, she didn't even see me once. Has she gone mad? I visited Fiance, who was badly injured. Her delicate face swollen beyond recognition, with several teeth missing. This wasn't the Fiance I remembered. She should be elegant and noble, as untouchable as the white snow on the mountains. Lying on the bed, bloody and unrecognizable, groaning all day long, this was not like her. I asked her why she had schemed to make me marry Ruyan, but she only shed silent tears. I didn't understand why. If she truly liked me, she would do something like this. Her parents said it was out of consideration, that Fiance knew Ruyan admired me and couldn't bear to compete with her, so she endured the pain. She was the one most deeply pained by it. I believed them. Fiance went through such a horrifying ordeal, how could I doubt her? In my past life, I missed out on Fiance. Now, living again, I could finally make up for the regrets, and that was good. With the experience of my previous life, it would be easier to reach the same heights once more. By that time, I would have no more regrets. I married Fiance, but her face could never return to its former appearance. But it didn't matter, as her looks weren't the only thing I liked. However, gradually, I realized something was wrong. How much longer do we have to endure such hardship? I tried to use my old connections, only to find every path blocked. Some people I couldn't even meet because I was no longer Ruyan's husband. My wife was a malicious woman who pushed her cousin into the water to kill her, seduced her cousin's fiancé, and stole her embroidery to pass off as her own. Even if I explained, no one believed me. Instead of helping, she made me the butt of my colleagues' jokes. I was cautious, yet I still couldn't keep my official position. And Fiance seemed to turn into someone I didn't recognize. She devoted all her thoughts to healing the scars on her face, as if without them, she could become an imperial consort like in our past life. I began to long for the days when I was married to Ruyan. She would manage the household orderly, cook meals that I liked, and personally sew my new clothes each season, perfectly tailored to make people envy. Her brother enabled me to thrive in my official career and gifted rare treasures to the house. I hardly found it difficult, yet I attained a high position. Fiance and I started to quarrel, from small disputes to daily turmoil. She resented me for not fulfilling my promises of prosperity, lamenting the hard life. If I had known, I never would have married you in the first place. Who else would marry you? Didn't you say you'd be content with plain food and simple living if you could marry me? Fiance screamed hysterically, who wanted to marry you? If it weren't for Ruyan liking you, I wouldn't have glanced at you. I was meant to enter the palace and live a life of luxury. What are you? Only then did I realize, in her eyes, I was only valuable as a tool. Those heartfelt confessions, those helpless feelings, they were all lies. I regretted it, frantically writing letters to J City, vowing to treat Ruyan well this time. But the letters vanished into the void, with no response. Watching the mad Fiance, hatred grew in my heart. If so, then no one would have it easy.